is really, really screwed. They have had the problems that they've had for 20, 25, 30 years. Like the policy choices that have led to where they are have been in place for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, there's this like accumulation of this mass of people and candidates and parties and nonprofits and lobbyists and beneficiaries that's grown up around the problem that benefit in some way or depend in some way on these problems to exist for their existence and their wealth and their well-being. And so you've got to fight all of that to get anything done. And all that's very expensive. And a lot of it is taxpayer funded. And then you have the fact that because this problem has been so severe for so long, anyone who's paying any amount of attention has a very strong feeling about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, for the most part, on one side or the other of the issue. And if they're on one side of the issue, they seemingly are not open to any information that would indicate that maybe they need to take a different approach in terms of how to solve the problem. So you've got a group of people who are promoting solutions that, you know, maybe aren't aesthetically perfectly in line with what you would want to see, but have empirical evidence to support them. And a group of people who are very, very much opposed to those potential solutions. And so it's just really, really difficult to get anything accomplished. And yet, you know, there are things happening in San Francisco. There is hope on the horizon. I am, I'm not saying it's not going to get fixed, but it's very difficult. I've come to Huntsville and it seems like there's just a lot more pragmatism here than in San Francisco. I think one of the problems with San Francisco is, and this is true kind of across the board when it comes to politics, but it's true to different levels. And that is the people who matter don't care and the people who care don't matter. But I think it's especially bad in San Francisco because the people who matter are so wealthy. They are so wealthy that they don't need government to function to be okay.
Right.
And so, and if you live in San Francisco and you are intelligent, local politics is probably the lowest ROI thing you could possibly do with your time.
Mm-hmm.
Like these people are literally like inventing the future, not to be like too whatever, but you know, they're working on interesting, important, profitable things. And so why would they show up to a city council meeting?
Is there a much smaller middle class there? Or is it just you have a higher proportionate in the, upper middle?
I mean, there basically isn't.
It's like a Caribbean nation where it's the ultra rich and then just poverty?
I would say there are three kinds of people in San Francisco. And obviously I'm being very hyperbolic and oversimplifying it. But there are basically three kinds of people. There are homeless people or basically homeless people. There are newcomers that have very high incomes. And there are people who are able to afford to live there because they bought land or their parents bought land at the right time.
Long time ago.
Yeah, in the 70s or 80s. Yeah. Those are the three kinds of people in San Francisco. And the first kind of person, the homeless person or near homeless person doesn't matter. They don't have the ability to make any change.
Mm-hmm.
The second kind of person doesn't have the desire to make change because they're busy and they're probably not planning to stay long term in San Francisco. They're there to get Google on their resume and develop skills and, you know, have a really high salary history and make money, but they're not necessarily going to stay long term. And the third kind of person, the person who has land wealth, is disincentivized to solve the problem because it might mean that their property values don't rise as quickly, and it might mean that people who are browner and poorer live in their neighborhoods.
Is there also then a lower proportion of like nonprofits that are trying to provide services to the homeless?
There are a lot of nonprofits.
There are a lot?
Yes.
Okay.
But
those are also probably have profitable motive behind them.
Yeah. So, for example, and I could not believe this was real, but when I was in San Francisco, I found out about this thing. I think it was called like a community development organization.
Yeah.
And what they do is they literally shake down housing developers and say, if you don't give us millions of dollars or create this playground or, buy us this treat, we are going to block your ability to get a permit to build the housing. And so they have this whole group that they mobilize to file lawsuits, to hold hearings, to delay the housing, and to decrease the number of units that they're allowed to build, and all these things to make it more expensive. Essentially, they weaponize the system so it's more expensive to not give them what they want, because those housing developers get less profit when the developments are smaller, and they have to pay the mortgage on the land while they're fighting this bureaucracy. So every month of delay is dollars out of the developer's pocket. So essentially, the community development organization has figured out what's the dollar we can shake them down for that will be less expensive to them than the pain in the ass that we can cause them. And that's their whole business model.
Wow.
And that's part of why housing is so expensive in San Francisco, because every unit you are paying for this frickin' playground or whatever, and these salaries of these people who